So first of all, let me begin by expressing my sadness that I'm not there at the Vatican with you. A lot of my old friends are there. A lot of people I would have loved to have had a chance to talk to are there. But happy World Water Day and the days around World Water Day. And I'm sure that the conversation will lead to productive results and to more energy moving forward tackling the world's water problems. I don't need to describe the nature of the world's water problems. You all know them. They're incredibly severe. There are challenges that we face today that we've faced for many decades. There are challenges moving forward, and those challenges are technological, and they're economic, and they're institutional. A lot of the conversations that you're having now and will be having over the next many decades will include how to solve the world's water problems. But one piece of the problem is not technological, it's not economic, it's not institutional, it's moral and it's ethical. And that challenge is around the human right to water. There is a human right to water. The United Nations declared a formal human right to water in the year 2010. A lot of the conversations, again, that you'll be having surround what that means and what the responsibilities are moving forward to implement the human right to water. But when I say this is a moral and an ethical issue, what I mean is the failure to provide safe water for billions of people and sanitation for billions of people is a moral failure. Part of the moral failure that we see around water is the failure of individuals and communities and governments to meet this need for safe water and sanitation for everyone on the planet. That's not a technical issue. That's not an economic issue. We know technologically how to provide safe water from any horrible quality of water or adequate sanitation for everyone on the planet, but we've failed to do so. It's not a question of economics because the amount of money required to meet basic human needs for water and sanitation is a tiny fraction of the cost of failing to meet those needs. And that's why when I say the challenges associated with safe water and sanitation are a moral and an ethical issue, the challenges associated with meeting the human right to water are a moral and an ethical issue. It's because we know that technologically and economically we can meet those needs, but we have failed to do so because governments are corrupt or because governments have other priorities and they haven't prioritized water as an issue, or because institutions aren't working properly. Those are all pieces of the puzzle. And the human right to water, declaring a human right to water, doesn't magically solve those issues. But they do remind us that we can tackle the failures around water with more than just the traditional tools that water agencies and individuals and communities and governments have applied in the past. The declaration in 2010 by the United Nations and by the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva of the formal human right to water was a tremendous step forward. It provided a moral and an ethical basis for helping to solve some of the greatest water challenges that we face. But it was only the first step. The next step really is how do we implement the human right to water? We individuals and we communities and we governments to meet the human right to water. I believe that we're moving ultimately toward the sustainable use of water. I think that's an inevitability. We're not there yet. We all see, unfortunately, the challenges that we still face around water, the failure to meet basic human needs for water, the growing conflicts over access to water, the challenges associated with now, unfortunately, unavoidable climate change. But I do think we also see success stories. There are people at the conference now who have worked tremendously hard to identify what the successes are around sustainable management of water. How we can use water more efficiently, how we can identify new supplies of water, how we can use smart economic tools to move toward more sustainable management and use, how we can remanage our institutions that have not been entirely effective at solving our water problems to move to more effective water solutions. All of those things together are what I call the soft path for water. And again, I think it's inevitable that we will move in the right direction and are moving in the right direction. The challenge is moving faster The challenge is engaging all of the communities in which we belong to move toward those successes and to spread them, to make them viral, if you will. And the conversations that we're having now around World Water Day, the conversations we're having at the Vatican and elsewhere, are critical steps to move toward that positive future. There's plenty of bad news out there. There are plenty of lessons to be learned from the mistakes that we've all made at every level. The trick is getting off the idea that the approaches we used in the 20th century are going to be enough to solve 21st century water problems. They're not. The fact that it's the 21st century, the fact that we have not solved all of our water problems, doesn't mean that we have to do what we did in the 20th century harder. There's things that we did in the 20th century that we still need to do in terms of infrastructure investment, in terms of managing and creating institutions in places that don't have them. But I would argue that's not enough. We also need new solutions, and that's part of the soft path for water. That's the idea of redesigning and reinvigorating our institutions. That's the lesson of understanding what worked and didn't work in economic approaches and pricing strategies and subsidies, and thinking about new tools in economics. We are not going to get out of our water problems by just building new hard infrastructure. There are places where new infrastructure is needed, but we had better design them differently for the 21st century, and we had better design our institutions not for the 20th century, but for the 21st century. I think a sustainable future for water is inevitable. I think that's the soft path for water that I've described, and that so many of you are working on. And the soft path means rethinking what we mean by water supply, and it doesn't mean tapping more water out of our overtapped aquifers. It doesn't mean building ad infinitum new big dams that will take water from our rivers and streams and destroy our aquatic ecosystems. But new supply means looking at wastewater treatment and reuse, which is being explored in many parts of the world now. It means capturing more stormwater and recharging our aquifers and using that as a source of supply. There are new supply options out there that we should move toward. But it also means rethinking demand for water, and in particular, using the water that we already have spent a lot of money capturing and using far more effectively and more efficiently, growing more food with less water, washing our clothes and washing our dishes and getting rid of our wastes and all the things that we do on the demand side with water with less water. And we're moving in that direction as well. The US uses less water today than we used 30 years ago for everything. And that's because, in part, we're becoming more efficient. And that's the demand side of the equation. But the soft path for water also means smarter economics and smarter institutions. It means understanding the vulnerability of our aquatic ecosystems and protecting aquatic ecosystems. And ultimately, it means the human right to water and understanding the critical need to meet basic human needs rather than trying to find more and more water to do the things that we're doing poorly. Part of what inspires me about water is, first of all, it's connected to everything we care about. It's connected to human health. It's connected to the health of our ecosystems. It's connected to climate and energy and food production and producing the goods and services that we all require. That alone makes water a critical issue that we need to address. I'm a scientist by training. I'm a parent. I'm a human being. I'm a citizen. Like all of us, water is critical for the things that we care about. And I think like all of us, we ultimately have the idea that we can solve our water problems. We can move to a more sustainable future if we just are willing to get rid of old ideas, to embrace new ideas, to embrace new communities, to embrace the idea that water is technology and economics and institutions and a human right that's so important for all of us. That's what inspires me about water, and if I didn't believe that we could move to a more positive future, I would have been depressed a long time ago, and I would have given this up, but I haven't. Like all of us, I think we're committed to a more sustainable future for the planet, and I think like all of us, we believe that we can get there, and we'll continue to work to achieve that future.